This is the WRDN Morning Farm Report. I'm Brian Winnikins, and joining us this morning is Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind to talk about a few agriculture issues going on in D.C. and some other things happening in D.C. Thank you to Alcivia Co-op, Compeer Financial, Osteoplastics, Annabis Silo, also the Animal Wellness Center of Buffalo Valley, and Synergy Co-op. And Congressman Kind, well, thanks for joining us. We're running out of time here to be able to put you up against the wall and ask you about ag here as we get towards the end of the congressional session and your retirement from Congress. But I guess for yourself, has it been a slow summer for you because you haven't had to go to every single thing on the planet because of the campaign?
Well, Brian, first of all, great to be with you this morning. Always good to catch up with you. And yeah, after 26 years, it's kind of winding down right now, but listen, it's been the honor of my life. I just never intended it to be the honor for my entire life, representing my home area in Congress. But I really enjoyed getting out, doing dairy breakfasts and the county fairs and the parades, the festivals, the listening sessions. I'm going to miss a lot of that. A, because the people are terrific. It's just good to get feedback from people. B, I probably have the most beautiful congressional district in the nation with the rolling hills and the coulees and the rivers and the lakes. And if you like outdoor recreation as I do, Western Wisconsin is a tough place to be. But yeah, it is winding down towards the end of the year. And we got a big election coming up to choose my replacement. I've got a few thoughts on that as well.
What are your plans after you're done? I mean, are you just going to go to the home farm in Jackson County and say, I'm going hunting and leave me alone? Or
well, if I'm starting to loosen up the old wing in case Aaron Rodgers' accuracy continues to suffer. I might come out of retirement and put on the green and gold, see if I can do some good up in Lambeau Field. But it's been a rough start of the season, to say the least. We're not used to this performance from our Packers. But listen, no decisions have been made from my end. I still have a couple of months to break the tape, as they say. You can imagine Tawny, having been with me for 26 years, a partner in this. She's got quite a list of things that she would like to do.
I can imagine. Oh, well, that might take the first year and a half, 2 years to get that completed.
Yeah, and it was a lot of traveling back and forth to Washington. We chose to stay here, to raise our family here. This is our home, so we're not going to be going anywhere. We're going to find new ways of being involved in the area and in our communities and to give back. Because this is just a tough place to be, to live anywhere else other than here. We just can't imagine it.
Let's talk about some of the things going on in agriculture. Another USMCA issue coming up, this time south of the border with corn, where the Mexican president is saying, you know what, 2024, no bioengineered corn can come into the country for import. Whoa, even, granted, we're a big dairy district, but we're a big corn district too. U.S. Trade Representative, have you been chatting with her about that?
Yeah, not only that, but we've been engaging the Mexican government because this phytosanitary standard is part of the new trade agreement that we have with Mexico. Any decision that they make has to be based on sound science and scientific evidence. They just can't willy-nilly start blocking our products under some guise of bioengineering. And so we're trying to avoid a trade complaint. We have enforcement tools that are available. You remember a few years ago when my opponent, Derek Van Ornen, was criticizing me because it was taking a while to get this trade agreement passed. Well, the reason it was taking a while is because we were trying to strengthen the enforcement chapter exactly for situations like this. So if Mexico is not living up to the terms of the agreement, we have enforcement tools now that we can hit them with in order to ensure that they are complying with what was agreed to. And so this is another example of why you need to do these trade agreements carefully. In fact, Brian, just a couple of weeks ago, I was down in Bogota, Colombia, and Santiago, Chile, because we have a few trade issues with those countries. We have trade agreements with them. They've been doing the same type of phytosanitary blockage of some of our agriculture products. And the Biden administration asked me to go down there and to talk to the government there and see if we can get on the same page so that our farmers have the access that they deserve in those markets. So these are things you have to keep monitoring, and we have to keep fighting hard to make sure that the good products that our family farmers are making here have access to these markets that's in compliance with the trade agreements that we have with these countries.
Those government meetings, I mean, how'd they go? I mean, did they say, well, okay, we'll look at it, or did they say, well, thanks a lot, but hit the road. You can't do anything to us.
They went well. There are two new governments now in Colombia and Chile, so it was good to go down there and meet with them and a lot of their ministers, ag ministers and foreign secretaries and that, to get to know them. I've always believed, Brian, that we were somewhat neglecting our relationship in South America and quite frankly in Africa too, and we need to be doing more of this outreach because they want strong ties with us. They want a good trade agreement that works for both of us. It just makes sense for them. And so by showing up, engaging these conversations shows that we care. We care about the relationship. We care about these trade agreements. We want to make it work well for all of us involved with it. So I think it was a good trip.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. Meanwhile, north of the border, we still have this issue with Canada with the milk. And they still seem to be playing stall ball here, for lack of a better phrase, with we're winning these, when we bring it in for a complaint, we win, but then they play stall ball. How much longer do we have to keep allowing stall ball before we say, okay, now we're going to start doing this, and that?
We've been exhausting the procedural enforcement mechanisms that are part of the trade agreement with Canada. And listen, the next step may go to trade sanctions, and that will definitely get their attention since there's so much trade. I mean, they're our second largest trading partner in the world. So there's a lot of goods and products and services, data that's crossing the border all the time. Last thing they want is to be involved in a trade war with us, but they have to live up to the terms of the agreement too. And that's, again, one of the items that took a while to get negotiated in the trade agreement. And we had to do it carefully and make sure that they knew what they had to comply with. And if they didn't, we'd have strong enforcement mechanisms to follow up on. But we also knew it was going to be a problem for them, given their supply management system they have in Canada, which is different from what we have here in the United States. They're very guarded with their market. They don't want a flood of dairy imports that could disrupt that supply management system. So we're trying to strike that right balance, being respectful of what they created, but also they need to be respectful of what they agreed to in the trade agreement. And that's all we're asking them to do.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. Meanwhile, Ron, on domestic, we've had the supply chain issues, not only for consumers, but even for farmers as well. And now we have this situation on the lower Mississippi River.
Yeah.
There's not a lot the federal government can do. I mean, the federal government can't make it rain, but does this kind of make your worst fears are coming true about not having enough money in the inter river waterway system to be able to deal with this?
Yeah, it's a serious situation. It's affecting commercial navigation up and down the Mississippi. Of course, that's our major route for getting agriculture products, especially in the upper Midwest, to various parts of our country and to foreign markets as well. But this is another example of these extreme weather events that comes with climate change. And the scientists have been warning us for years that we have to take action in order to address it, or it's going to have these downstream unintended consequences. And it's one of the quite, distinguishing characteristics of who's running to replace me in office. You have Brad Path, who understands the challenges our farmers have. He's a farm kid himself. He was agriculture secretary, farm service administrator for the state of Wisconsin, understands the challenges that rural Wisconsin is facing. Then you have the other guy, Derek Van Orden, who's a climate change denialist. He doesn't even accept the science, doesn't have any constructive solutions to address, these extreme events and what it's going to mean to our local economy. In fact, the only thing he knows how to do, and he did this against me 2 years ago, is just attack. He thinks politics is a blood sport, whereas Brad will always put people over politics, work hard as I have through the years to find common ground, to get things done. And I think that's what people back home expect their representatives to do, and not just be an attack dog all the time and run negative ads and not offer anything constructive at all for the people back home here.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning, in relation with the climate change and all of that, there's some new climate smart programs coming from USDA, but let's talk a little bit about, the renewable fuels standard. There's a lot of farmers and a lot of that they feel still betrayed by this administration and really even kind of by the Congress when it comes to these electric vehicles. But we have something here in liquid fuel, ethanol, soy
Mhm.
biodiesel, and it seems like that's just being pushed aside. And and that, we see these electric vehicles and there's really no infrastructure. And again, it might work in a major city, but in rural America, I mean,
Yeah, Brian, let me push back a little bit on your premise here. I think we've had a very supportive administration with President Biden and especially Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack, who you recall was former governor of Iowa. So he understands the importance of the renewable fuel standard, ethanol production. He's been extremely supportive, as the president has been. And it's the big oil companies that are doing everything they can to undermine the renewable fuel standard and to attack ethanol production. And the Republicans are the ones who have kowtowed to big oil. They always have, and they will in the future, which is unfortunate because we have the ability to grow our own fuel, and we need to support that and sustain it as we're making this longer term conversion to a more carbon-free economy. So yeah, there's going to be a future for electric vehicles. You're right in pointing out that the infrastructure is not there yet. In our passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we have money now devoted for the build out of the electric charging stations. And I'm not talking about 8-9 hour charges. I'm talking about 15, 20-minute charges to get up and going again, which is going to be crucial in rural America. And we have this capability and the technology exists. And now we're starting to make that investment. And boy, it would be nice to not be dependent on oil producing nations like Russia and Iran and Venezuela when they do crazy things as Putin has, and the disruption that we see in the energy markets and the pump price going up because of an invasion in Ukraine. It would be nice to be independent from that in the future. But as long as we maintain our dependence on big oil, we're going to be dependent on those big oil producing countries. And I throw Saudi Arabia in that mix too. They recently sided with Putin, decided to cut back on production. We're seeing that price effect affecting us now. It's another wake-up call that what we've been tried in the past is not sustainable, and that we have to be better and smarter with the technology that's available to make this conversion. But in the meantime, let's grow our fuel so that we don't have to rely on countries like Russia and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela. That to me makes sense.
But I guess, farmers that I've talked with, and even myself, I guess personally, there's always going to be a need for a liquid type of fuel. And I understand, okay, let's spend money to get this infrastructure built. I do get that.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's this, we're going to just have all electric cars in the future. And again, I still, even if we have an infrastructure, that electricity is still coming from either a natural gas or whatever. I mean, Europe is finding out really fast that having just wind and solar for their electric power isn't working for them. But don't we also have existing technology now to say, you know what, your 2027 Chevy Silverado or your Ford F-150 or your Cummins diesel truck is going to run on 100% ethanol, 100% soy biodiesel, or even hydrogen. Why aren't we saying, let's do that? And because that's going to be just as carbon free. Yeah. And it's probably going to be something that is going to be quicker to do and last longer than even the electric part.
Yeah, Brian, you're exactly right. And this is all about transition and what's available right now and what we can ramp up tomorrow rather than 15, 20 years from now. And clearly we have to be wide-eyed and realistic on what our capability is. And so there's going to be a role with all that. I've always been a proponent of smart, safe nuclear power, which is carbon-free and always reliable 24/7. We ought to be looking at these new reactors that people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are building in Wyoming, of all places. And that's king coal country. And yet they're building these new prototype nuclear reactors with little chance of meltdown. So yeah, there's going to be a transition with it, but clearly the future does not lie in being so dependent on countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela. We're dominant in the global oil market. And quite frankly, the more we pivot, the harder it is for them to sustain their own economies. It will force them to have to start investing in their people rather than just their natural resources that they're exploiting and that Putin is using as a weapon in this war against Ukraine right now. So yeah, this is going to have to come. And this is why, again, we're going to need forward-thinking leaders that can show us what this transition future is going to look like. and I get back to Brad Path. I mean, he was dealing with this as Agriculture Secretary, as FSA Director for the entire state. He knows these issues very well and what will work for us and make sense here throughout Western Wisconsin.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. International, but also still affecting the farm when it comes to fertilizers and even just world grain markets and all the situation in Ukraine. Again, everybody is talking about it. And Ron, granted, you're going to be leaving here soon, but how concerned are you about this expanding into where suddenly the Wisconsin National Guard's having to call people up and people from the 3rd District they're in Ukraine?
Listen, bro, I'm not too concerned about Putin doing something stupid that would invoke NATO and get NATO into the fight. They've had such a god-awful poor performance just dealing with the Ukrainian fighting force. The last thing they want is to go toe-to-toe with us and NATO writ large. Putin may be crazy, but I don't think he's that crazy. Now is what we need to be doubling down in our support and assistance to the Ukrainian fighters. They've been incredibly courageous. They've got Russia on their heels. They've been recapturing lost territory. They're on the offensive. And yet the Republican leadership, Kevin McCarthy, was just saying the other day that if Republicans are in the majority, they're going to cut support from Ukraine, which I think would be the worst circumstances. The only thing Putin respects is power and force. And if they see us get weak-kneed in our support of Ukraine, they're going to be doubling down. And they may use that as a pretext to look at the Baltics next, or Romania or Hungary, that Putin feels is part of their sphere of influence. And that would directly affect NATO then. So I would hope Kevin McCarthy walks those comments back. I don't think he will, because the last time we did a military assistance package to Ukraine, we had 70, 80 Republicans vote no on it. I don't know why they've become the party of Putin, but that's the message that they're sending, not only to him, but the rest of the world. And I just think that's incredibly dangerous and short-sighted, given the incredible fighting capability that Ukraine has demonstrated, especially the last couple of months here.
The agriculture side of this, excuse me, as well. You know, we do get a lot of fertilizer from Russia. We have for many, many years. Same with Ukraine, and a lot of that stuff now obviously has been cut off, and that's going to hurt us. And it's something that it's not like, well, let's come up with something different so we're not dependent on them, i.e., you know, an electric vehicle. It's because that's where the natural resource is.
Right.
What do we, you know,
listen,
do we need to start looking at other ways or having USDA's research?
Listen, the Biden administration has been smart and strategic in the economic sanctions we're applying. We have exempted food and fertilizer from that category of sanctioned items. So we recognize the need that exists with the current market as it exists. Another reason I went down to Chile the other week is because they're the second largest producer of lithium in the world. And we'd rather have them selling and working with us on the lithium production rather than to China. And that's another important source for renewable energy here in this country. So we got to be a little more smarter and strategic in how we're coping with all this. But again, Russia has shown that they're not a good partner. They're certainly not our friend. And the less dependent we become with them in the future, I think the better off we're going to be. And so we need to be encouraging new markets being opened up for the production of fertilizer, for wheat, for instance, and start developing that as quickly as we can.
Finally, obviously you won't be a part of it, but the upcoming Farm Bill. Would you like to see what you tried for so many years to get in payment limitations and crop insurance reform? Do you think that will ever come in? And do you think that with the Farm Bill, again, you won't be part of it, that it might actually be split up, or they're going to take the farm and the nutrition out of it and they're going to split the two?
Yeah, you know, I've been proud to lead that fight, Brian, as you know, through the years of trying to reduce these huge taxpayer subsidies going to big agribusiness to the disadvantage of our family farmers back home. It's harder for them to compete with the consolidation that we're seeing in agriculture, the vertical integration that we're seeing in agriculture. And a lot of that was driven by the huge subsidy payments that we send certain entities in this country. And mind you, they have a powerful lobby in Washington and they know how to circle the wagons, but we've been successful in moving the needle. And I hope others will step up and continue seeing how fiscally irresponsible it is for us to do that in light of budget deficits that we're running. but it's also not smart economically to be subsidizing a handful of very powerful industries in this country to the exclusion of our family farmers back home. But I'm also hoping in this next farm bill, we'll have a chapter when it comes to carbon sequestration. There's a lot that our farmers can and want to do in order to help combat climate change. They're on the front lines of this with the droughts that we're seeing throughout the country right now, the extreme weather events, the extreme flooding events that are related to climate change too. So they have a vested interest to play their role, but we have to create the right incentives for them to do it. They need to be paid for doing it. Cover crops, again, is something that we ought to be including in the program funding as we move forward. And I just see a lot of hard work and innovation happening in rural America, especially coming from our farmers who understand that there's a role for them to play. But it's got to be economically feasible too for them to do that.
That is Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind. And Congressman Kind, we'll probably do one more interview in December before
Sure.
we go. We gotta tease you, could take a shot at you, whatever, at least one more time, before you before you leave office and become, private citizen Kind. And, you won't be able to fly all the time out of, you'll probably miss that, won't you? Flying out of La Crosse.
Well, listen, I'll be very proud to carry the most distinguished title anyone can have in the world, and that is being a citizen of the United States of America. We just need to remind ourselves of that from time to time. We got a lot going for us as a country, and let's not forget about the good attributes that this country has to offer.
Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind, you're listening to the WRDN Morning Farm Report.